All right. Well, welcome everybody to episode 4 of the Betterment Blueprint. I'm again joined by my brother, very own flesh and blood. Actually, I don't know if I can say that if he's not my son, but I don't know.
I'm your blood. I'm not your flesh.
Okay, so my very own blood.
That makes it sound like we're a gang.
This is how the last episode started. Okay, so, yeah, we had a lot of fun last time on the episode, and we just want to do another run at it. I thought that today we could talk about...
I won't even plug my own YouTube channel because I don't want this to be associated.
Oh yeah, let's plug your...
I have a YouTube channel called Political Therapy. If you want to hear more about politics and the state of the world, but from a more optimistic and more, forward-looking lens, then check it out.
Yeah.
It's on YouTube.
Yeah, the reason I invite him on the show is not for his political viewpoints, but just because he's...
And we'll force them in there anyway.
got good viewpoints in general.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
That's very kind.
And I feel like that's where his real value is, and he's just decided to put it towards politics, which is fine. Okay. But yeah, I thought that this episode we could talk about letting go of things.
Yeah.
Because I think that's something
Topical.
that's been very very relevant in my life.
Mm-hmm.
I was doing some counting, which is never good.
Counting.
Yeah, I was counting. It's the year 2024,
Okay.
and I think I've lost
Why are you using a sexy voice right now?
4 friends.
Oh, damn.
Yeah.
Is it weird if I say that you're like using a sexy voice right now, or is it like
No, man.
is that normal?
It's
Because
not
you're
like-
using a sexy voice right now and it's throwing me the fuck off.
This is my recording voice.
Why are you using it?
Just trying to avoid voice cracks. Okay. Speaking of voice cracks, I just want to shout out to any of my students listening to this episode. Really appreciate you.
Oh, and
Shout out to Danny, listening to all of my episodes. You're
Yes.
my accountability partner. You're awesome, man. And also shout out to our mom,
yes,
who has listened to every single episode since we started,
and is giving us some very
and is
valuable
giving
freedom.
great advice.
Yes,
Yeah,
genuinely great
feedback.
advice.
Yeah,
And I broke one of her rules already, which is don't curse.
It was a loose rule. So,
Sorry, I'm mad.
yeah, but like I was saying, I've had to let go of a lot of friends this year.
Mm.
Some of them have come back, but most of them won't. And it's been tough.
Mhm.
It's hard. I don't know if you've experienced that much.
Losing friends?
Yeah.
No, I'm like a perfect friend. No one ever leaves.
But really.
Yeah, I mean, no. I of course, have I lost friends? I've definitely lost a lot more relationships than I have friends.
Okay.
I don't typically lose friends from like falling out. Usually it's just like a normal growing apart sort of thing. But I lose relationships out of falling out most of the time.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's where my letting go probably mostly occurred.
Have you had a lot of trouble letting go of...
Yeah, definitely. I mean, definitely a lot more in the past. Now I'm a little bit better at it. At least I like to think that I'm a little bit better at it after getting into like philosophical Buddhism and all of that. All of that. The entire thing is about lack of attachment.
Okay.
And that has been immensely helpful for me.
How so?
Well, if you... So, with Buddhism, the idea is...
Also, he pronounces Buddhism a little weird.
You pronounce it correctly. It's Buddhism.
But he's saying Buddhism, you know,
Yeah,
like
why do you say it like that?
with Buddha.
Yes, Buddha. Yes.
Anyways, continue.
Yeah. So the idea is that all suffering is derivative of desire. And desire in itself is essentially an attachment. Right? And so through getting rid of desire, or at least defining our desires and chasing after the ones that we truly want, do we actually achieve something that they call nirvana, which is something that is like, we kind of assume nirvana to be this like metaphysical state, and it's not really. It is like, it's a state you can achieve, at least if you believe in Buddhism, in the world now. Like you can be without attachment, or at least without what they call unskillful desires.
Okay.
And so in pursuing that, I've become a lot better about, not perfect, but a lot better about deciding which attachments or what desires I actually want to pursue and pursuing those, and realizing that the other ones are just thoughts in my brain and I don't have to buy into them. Yeah.
Thoughts in your brain that you don't have to buy into.
Yeah, that part's not actually from Buddhism. That's from like therapy. Like every thought that you have is not one that you have to buy into. Sometimes actually every time thoughts just come and they just go. Some of them are more painful than others, and those have to be treated with some level of care, because you can really zero in on those thoughts, and then what I call like the two merchants in your mind, the ones that compete to give you thoughts, right? Like, so imagine two merchants in your mind, right? And they want to sell you, but what they sell you are thoughts, and their currency is attention.
Okay.
So they compete with each other in order to have the most amount of attention from you. And so because they're competing and because their currency is attention, the attention that you give to the thoughts that they produce are what they're going to use to determine what you actually like. And like is a very like loose term. They're actually trying to determine what you'll pay attention to. And if you pay attention to like the really destructive thoughts that make you feel bad, then they're going to keep producing those, because they find that that optimizes for your attention. That's how I conceptualize it in my own mind. And so what it comes down to is learning how to stop giving those thoughts attention, let them come, let them go, and actually give attention to the thoughts that you want to pursue. That's what's been really important for me. And in learning that, I have learned how to let go in some regards.
So in the moment, like when you're in it, when you're feeling the pain of a lost relationship or a lost friendship or even something else, even if it didn't have to do with people, maybe a lost opportunity or something turning out in your life not in the way you wanted it to. How do you remind yourself in the moment that, oh, this is just a thought, I don't need to like put too much value into this?
So it's a really good question, and I think that it's a practice. So like it's a habit that you have to implement. So at first it's not going to be just something that comes automatically. It's going to be something that you have to consciously remind yourself of. And your question was, how do you even do that? How do you consciously remind yourself of that you're supposed to do this thing, especially when you're feeling a lot of emotion? There's a couple ways to do it. I mean, for me, I got to such a point in my life where I felt like I was at a rock bottom and I had no other choice. And so for me, it was really easy to remember because it was my buoy, it was my lifeboat. Like this is the only thing that I had in order to feel okay.
So your advice is
reach rock bottom.
All right, there you go. So
well, I think
that's the key.
I think if you want to remember to do it, if you're having trouble remembering, I see the audio is peaking. That's gonna be really funny for anyone who's listening. If you want to remember that you like these are just feelings and that you're just supposed to feel them, you do it the same way that you would remind yourself of anything, right? I mean, I know that you on your phone have like regular reminders of be playful, joyful.
Yeah.
I think that's great. I think that having spaced repetition and reminders. This is actually, they teach you when people teach you how to study. They teach you that spaced repetition. It's that. Like if you constantly remind yourself of something, when the actual stimulus occurs, you'll remember that this is something that you're supposed to be doing. So like feelings are meant to be felt, and thoughts are meant to be thought of and then left, because they don't have to be zeroed in on. They don't have to be the thing that you focus on in that moment.
Yeah. They
can just be thoughts, and you don't have to buy into them.
Yeah, I like that you bring that up. I think that reminds me something I was just thinking about as you're talking. Like one of the great drawbacks of personal development is the lack of emphasis on actual functional day-to-day application.
Yeah.
Right. I think especially like a great place to consume personal development, surprisingly, is actually social media. Right. I feel like it's a place that we all kind of hang out at during our free time. And I know that
I don't, because I'm better than you.
Well, there have been times where I'm down in the dumps and I don't know how to process my feelings. And so I go on Instagram because it's just a good place.
You go on Instagram to process your feelings?
No, to numb out.
Oh, yeah.
That's how I numb out.
Yeah.
I go on Instagram, right? And
for a second, I thought you went on Instagram to process your feelings.
No.
We use Instagram very differently.
No. But the algorithm is so good that it figures out that you're not feeling that good. I've noticed this, right? Like if I go on Instagram and I'm in a good mood and I'm specifically watching videos that are funny and lighthearted, I get more and more and more of those.
It's probably because you're paying attention to them.
Yeah, right. And it's like really good at picking up on that.
Like a merchant.
Yeah. Yeah. Similarly, sometimes I'll go onto Instagram hungry, and it'll be like 11:30 p.m.
Yeah.
And it'll be just reel after reel after reel of cooking videos, and I'm just like, how did I get here? How am I ever gonna leave? Like this is amazing. How do I make this my set of reels like permanently?
Yeah.
But sometimes when I'm feeling particularly bad, and I need some picking up, I'll pay more attention to those reels that are like super motivational. Like they have these great quotes, and
the David Goggins of the
and then
world.
people like say stuff, and you're like, whoa, like this is really, and they are really specific. Like Instagram reels will pick up on the fact that I'm specifically feeling pain with regards to relationships, and it'll post more reels like that on me.
Okay.
And the thing with all of those, getting back to the original point I was making, is just like you'll see these posts and they'll have these incredible like quotes about, you know, like looking at things differently or remembering the bigger picture or like helping you change your perspective. And then you just like scroll on to the next reel and the value is kind of lost.
Yeah.
And I feel like most of the personal development world is kind of like that. And the pieces of personal development that have really stuck around, that are really like timeless, like How to Win Friends and Influence People and Atomic Habits, and those like books and those people who they provide like really actionable information.
Sure.
And it's not just like this feel good, like make you feel like there's hope in the moment and then didn't actually do anything to change your life sort of information.
Sure.
It's like, here's what you actually got to do, which is why I really liked how you brought up the like reminders, because it's like no one thinks about like I'm going through a breakup, like or I just lost a like really close friendship, or I missed out on this really great job, or I got laid off or whatever, and it's like, oh, I'm gonna put some reminders on my phone. But it's like you literally have to remind yourself to look at this differently, because it's not your natural way of looking at it. If it was, like, you wouldn't be struggling with this particular issue. I was talking to one of my students today about like his personal life, and he was talking to me about how he got like cheated on, and his attitude was so good. He was talking about one of his friends, how one of his friends was like, dude, like, she just self-eliminated herself for you. Wow. Like, she did all the work.
That was incredible. That's so insightful.
And I was like, like this, I don't know. I don't even know how old they are, like 15, 16, because they're sophomores in high school.
Yeah.
I was like, wow, like, even I, like, when that happens to me, like, I don't even think about it like that. I automatically think about, like, what is wrong with me, and, like, what did I do wrong?
Yeah.
And this kid is just like...
You're like, wow, you just, like, your life just got, like, intensely more optimized. That's great.
Yeah, and it's like... I can't remember why I brought that up, but it's like... It's just one of those things where it's like... Yeah, I really can't remember why I brought that up.
What were you talking about? You were talking about how it was the reminders and stuff. Why those reminders were important.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay. Well, I think that's really cool. I think it's really interesting how I hear frequently about how the kids are... Actually, as a teacher, you can probably speak to this in some regard. How kids coming out of COVID are just like significantly more difficult to deal with. You don't really have any context on that. So
here's the thing:
you're a new teacher.
Like, people say that. Yeah, people say that for sure.
Yeah,
I've heard that from other teachers, but I'm a new teacher.
Yeah.
So like,
you have no context.
I have literally no baseline.
Okay.
So I get into the classroom, and these kids are just like off the walls, like
Sure.
cursing like crazy,
Mm-hmm.
couldn't care less about school. I mean, some of them care. Of course,
Mhm.
there's always kids that care.
Yeah.
But I feel like the average student just like
Doesn't.
does not see the value
Okay.
in school. And like fair, right? Like
Mhm.
I cared a lot about school and I barely saw like the value in it. I just
Yeah.
cared about it because like I was told I was supposed to care about it.
Mm-hmm.
And so like to me they're just kids,
Mm-hmm.
you know. But I think what I was getting at is like this kid like he's going through this thing where he got cheated on, which I've been cheated on multiple times, right? And like his friend is reminding him that like he's the real value I feel like that friends bring a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And they have brought to me as well in my situations is just like they provide a different way of looking at something. They
Yeah.
provide a perspective, right?
Yeah.
Because you're so in it that it's so hard to see it
Mm-hmm.
any other way. And his friend is just like, yeah, like she just self-selected herself out of the process. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you really dodged a bullet, bro. And it's
Mhm.
like, yeah, I guess I did. But
Mhm.
like, you know, an hour later, you might be back in the dumps again
Yeah.
and thinking about, oh, like I'm such a shitty person. Like, what did I do wrong? I'm never gonna love anyone else. Which I would feel the same way, right? And that's just because like that's how we're wired. And we just
Yeah,
have to be reminded that there's another way of looking at things.
Well, I think it's also important to remember in the moments where you're feeling pretty bad about yourself that like two things are simultaneously true and seem contradictory but aren't. One,
Okay.
this too will pass. Like this idea that like, you know, like the feeling will go away. Like whatever you're feeling, good or bad, will go away. So like you might be having like a really great perspective right now and actually feel pretty okay about it. And then 2 hours later you might be feeling just as bad as you were like 2 days ago.
yeah.
And that's normal. That's completely normal. It's okay to have these periods of going up and down and up and down.
Mm-hmm.
It's also true that you need to feel your feelings.
Yeah.
And you should not let your desire to feel better get in the way of you feeling what you feel right now.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's very easy. It's incredibly easy to drown out the emotion in something, whatever you need at this moment in order to drown out the emotion. And your growth from adversity and from the pain that you feel is a direct result of how long you are able to look in the mirror without blinking, essentially. Like within like the you know metaphorical mirror of like pain.
Yeah.
Like how long can you really look at yourself and like sit in the pain, and not purposelessly, you know, not like allowing yourself to stew. There's a difference between stewing and looking at yourself, right? And you know, recognizing the difference between those two things, I think, is really important. Something that I think success gurus don't talk a lot about. I think, you know, I was talking to Apacha today about, so Apacha's our dad, about the thing I see wrong with success is slightly different. I think this is something you've told me actually, and I've adopted it into my like general practice of living, though you might have gotten it from someone else. We only ever do things that we want to do. You've never in your life done anything that you didn't want to do. Because, and like to give the argument, because that might not make sense to some people listening, you might in some cases have done something that you didn't want to do, but then ask the question, why did you do it? You did it because you wanted something that doing that thing would have given you.
Right.
So you essentially...
There was some greater purpose.
Yeah, there was some greater purpose. So
Yeah.
anything that you positively do, like any action that you take, you only took that action because you wanted to do it. So when success gurus talk about like doing the things that you want to do, I feel like they don't talk enough about like making it the thing that you want to do. Because there's obviously like a lot of us say that, like, for example, I want to like lose weight.
Yeah.
Right? And that might be true. It might be true that you want to lose weight, but in the moment when you're making a decision between having, you know, that next cookie or not,
Yeah.
it's not about discipline. In that moment, it has nothing to do with discipline. It's what you want more. Do you want the cookie more, or do you want to lose weight more? the decision you make in that moment is entirely dependent upon that. And so your schema has to be, that's the wrong word in that context, whatever. Your plan has to be centered around making losing weight the most important thing. Like making it at least more important than eating that next cookie. You need to find some actionable way for that to happen. Because the problem is, in most cases, that it's so ephemeral and like, immaterial, the idea of losing weight.
Yeah.
That it, like, I had this material cookie and I had this immaterial concept of losing weight. And
there's
I
like
can
something real right in front of you, and then there's just this
idea of like what I will be, what life will be like.
Right.
And that's really hard to choose when you are, and that's any decision. That's smoking, not smoking. That's drinking, not drinking.
Yeah.
Every decision is based on this matrix of like, there's this real physical thing that I can have right now, or this immaterial maybe thing that I could have in the future. So now you have to like learn how to make a decision here and make that not real immaterial thing actually more attractive, which is why people try to do like reward punishment structures, right? Because a reward and punishment is real. It brings it right here.
Yeah.
There's a couple ways to do it, right? Like you do that, you can do something that like we call like playing the tape out through to the end, which is like, okay, sitting here making a decision. Your brain will fight this, by the way, because it doesn't want to do this, because if you play the tape out through to the end, your brain knows what will happen. You will make the right decision. But essentially, it's just like, okay, I can have this cookie. So like, let's imagine like what happens. What happens if I have this cookie? I probably don't gain 40 pounds immediately, right? If that happened, I probably wouldn't eat the cookie.
Yeah.
But I know how I will feel immediately after, because I know what my goals are. I know what I want to do. I know what this will lead me towards. I know what this will lead me further away from. And I know that like in 20 seconds after I'm done noshing on this cookie, I will feel like not the person that I want to be. And that's probably not worth the cookie. And then you won't have it anymore, because now the emotion is real. The feeling is real. So like, that's one way to do it. You could, the reward punishment has worked really well. I think both of them in conjunction probably work the best.
Yeah.
But finding ways to do that, I think, is something that we don't talk about enough in like success habit industry.
Right.
Because it's all, Franz Kafka in Man's Search for Meaning, like he gets this immediately. And Darren Hardy also gets this. They say it in different ways, but Darren Hardy calls it why power. Why power is more important than willpower. I didn't understand how important that was when I was young. But now that I'm a little bit older, I totally get it. The reason why you're doing something is so much more important than having the discipline or the will to do it. Because discipline and will mean nothing if you don't actually want to do it.
Right.
And Franz Kafka, in Man's Search for Meaning, says, a man with a strong enough why can endure any how, which is true. Like, I've seen people do some insane things because they just wanted it really bad.
Yeah.
If you want it really bad, you'll find a way to do it.
Yeah.
You know enough. Like, for the most part, if you're trying to do something, you know enough to pursue the thing. It's not that you don't have enough information. It's that you're not trying to actually actively pursue it, and you're trying to find a way to not pursue it through the information gathering stage. The information gathering stage is like the most insidious part of the process, because it makes you feel like you're doing something when you're not.
I know that.
Yeah.
I feel that. I think I get stuck in that stage a lot.
Yeah, and you already know enough. You do. You know enough. You can start moving. Right. In fact, if I gave you no more information, I'm fairly confident, like 99% confident, that you could achieve your goals with the information you have now.
I think the key is you should continue the information. It shouldn't be a stage you're in before you start to work.
Yeah, that's true as well.
You should just keep doing it as you're.
Yeah, you don't have to. Yeah,
you don't have to do all this information gathering first and then start working towards something.
In fact, you should start working, and then information should be like something that supplements your
absolutely
work.
Yeah, and then it's like it's a more functional version of information gathering because it's coupled with action and it has a lot more meaning.
And if you want to be really safe about it, don't information gather until something in your process isn't working.
Right.
Because like, then maybe you need to change something and maybe you don't know what to do.
Yeah.
But if you do a process and it's working, why the fuck would you ever need to information gather? It's already
why would
working.
You need to change it?
There's nothing going wrong.
Yeah.
The problem is that you're stuck in this stage of information gathering where you get to satisfy this feeling of doing something while simultaneously doing absolutely nothing to achieve any of your goals.
Yeah.
You're doing nothing. You are doing nothing. And it's really easy to feel like you're doing something, but you are doing nothing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think kind of bringing this back to what we were originally talking
about.
Yeah,
I immediately thought like this. Yeah.
Of like letting go of things. I think it, like, kind of in the same breath of what we've been talking about. I think in my head, it really comes down to like the story you tell yourself
Mm-hmm.
about what happened and more importantly, why it happened. Right? Because it's not really the situation itself that you're trying to move on from.
Mm-hmm.
It's the like version of the situation in your head
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that you're trying to move on from. Right? Because objectively what happened doesn't really matter all that much.
There is no such thing as like objectively what really happened.
Right.
It only is you're colored by your perception.
Yeah, like say you recently had a breakup,
Mm.
right? And it's like, I guarantee you, if you put both people in the relationship in separate rooms and you interviewed them and you got all the information about what happened, there would be some commonalities and there would be some differences, because these are two different people,
Right.
and their perceptions of what happened are colored by their past experiences and who they are, and
Mm-hmm.
like their perception of the other person and all of this stuff, right?
Yeah.
And the beautiful thing, and we've talked about this a lot, right,
Mm-hmm.
in our coaching sessions, and like I think it's something that's talked about in personal development in general a lot,
Mm-hmm.
is like your perception is totally under your
Yeah. I
control.
had a conversation with a couple of friends. I was trying to get them to understand this concept.
Okay.
Where like, and they got it eventually. It was actually really cool because they finally got cognitive behavioral therapy. Like they understood like why it exists, because that's what that is.
Really?
Perception change. Yeah. I didn't know if you know this, but like,
No, I didn't.
Yeah. So cognitive behavioral therapy. And I'm like, take this with a grain of salt. I'm not a therapist, but like, to our two viewers, take this with a grain of salt. But from what I understand about cognitive behavioral therapy, a lot of it is about changing the way that you behave. It's behavioral. But a lot of the ways that you behave are inherently dependent upon your perceptions about yourself. Because, and Dr. K says, like, talks about this a lot, and in like a very, I think, important way, which is like, your feelings are valid, but your perception of reality is not.
Mm.
And your mind will retroactively go through all of your experiences and recolor them through the context of your beliefs. So if you think you're a loser, your mind will go back through your life and color events through the lens of you being a loser. Neutral events get interpreted negatively, and negative events get interpreted super negatively. Positive events get interpreted neutrally. This happens all of the time. So what cognitive behavioral therapy tries to do is go back to the original events where you started to have this belief about yourself and recontextualize those.
Do you have like some examples from your personal life?
Sure. Yeah. So like I personally, when I was younger, especially like, hi, I'm about to talk about you online. But I felt like we have a great relationship. I really love my relationship with Emma. But we argued when I was in high school about like technology, normal stuff, right? Like fairly like regular conversations about tech and stuff. I wanted more, she wanted less, right?
Yeah.
That's fairly
classic,
normal.
like
Yeah.
older,
Very
younger
very
generation
classical like
clash,
conversation.
Yeah.
But I used to get like very angry at her because of those conversations. Right? I'd be like very typical moody teenager, storm off to my room and like slam the door. You don't understand me, Mom, or stuff like that.
Yeah.
Right? But that colored my perception of like her and like our relationship. So that when we would talk in the future and we'd have conversations, I would always approach it with some level of caution and be like and like wonder like, okay, is she trying to get me to do something right now? Is she trying to like I would just get like very angry unnecessarily and just like she was like just saying very neutral things towards me.
Okay.
And then I would be like, like I just feel like very like cold and standoffish.
That is a really great like example.
Mm-hmm.
Like instead of talking about how you are coloring your own memories, how someone else's actions end up coloring your interpretations of all of their actions.
Right. Yeah.
Just from one experience.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah,
I get
yeah,
what you're saying.
Yeah. So like, I mean, I could give you the example of like a personal experience.
No.
With
But
this puts it in a different context.
Yeah.
Right? So yeah, like, and so like my mom and I now have a really great relationship. But the reason we have it now is because I had to like go back to that original thing where like I'm 19 now. This happened when I was like 16, 15 years old. And it's such a small thing, right? It was like an argument about technology, right?
Yeah.
Of all things, an argument about technology and how much I was using technology. And I had to go back and be like, okay, so like what did I take from this? Like what perceptions did I take from this? And they were like, oh, she's like out to get me. Like she just doesn't want me to be happy or something.
Yeah, classic thing.
Yeah, like very like
about their
kid
parents.
logic.
Yeah.
Like yeah. And so I had to go back and be like, oh no, that doesn't make any sense at all. Like she was worried that I would be like irresponsible online.
Yeah, I could think of an example of that too.
Okay.
Just with my students.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and so our student population is like it's a Title I campus, meaning that like a lot of our students are really poor.
Right.
And it's also a very high mobility campus.
Okay.
Meaning that the students like compared to the average, like they move a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And so what that means functionally like for the classroom is you'll be teaching a kid and one day they'll just be gone. Like they'll just move.
Mm-hmm.
And the other like flip side of the coin is you'll be teaching a class and all of a sudden you'll have like an influx of like 5 new students.
Right. Yeah.
You've never seen before and they're coming in the middle of a unit and you're like, how am I supposed to catch this person up? And I don't know if this is like a extension of that, but we have a lot of like truancy, so a lot of students don't show up, a lot of students skip, and just because our student population is pretty poor, like I think school is not really the biggest priority for a lot of them.
Yeah.
Not even because of them, but because of their families. Like
sure.
they have to take care of their families. They have a lot of them work jobs, which to me, like working a job in high school is like that's crazy. Like you don't do that when you're a kid.
Mm-hmm.
You do that when you're older. But for them, like this is the reality. Like
right.
a lot of them are working jobs to support their families,
Mm-hmm.
Which is cool and like a big deal. But me as a teacher, and I think a lot of other teachers too, like sometimes there are students that skip because they're irresponsible and they don't understand the value of school.
Mm-hmm.
There are also students that skip because like they have other responsibilities outside of school that either they in their own heads or their families have told them are more important than school.
Right. Yeah.
And all the time I make this jump of like some kid like hasn't been coming to school and finally they show up and I pull them out of the room and I talk to them and I'm like, hey, where have you been? Like I haven't seen you in forever. Like you're behind on so much stuff. And they're usually pretty real with me and they tell me like, you know, like this and this is like going on in my family, or I'm like depressed as shit, or like I have to take care of my like sister's kids because she works and stuff like real things where it's like, oh well, like no duh, like don't come to school then, like go do that, like that's more important than coming to your like 4th period chemistry class.
Or at least it feels like it at that point.
Yeah, and like
in the long term it probably is.
Well, yeah, I mean there's it's not black and white, but the point is that like those kids who skip just because they're like kind of irresponsible and they don't care and they don't have any good reason to skip, they're just lazy. I think those kids like they kind of tend to color our perception of all the other students who skip as well.
Sure. Yeah.
And then when you talk to these other students, you're like, holy cow, like they have these whole lives and these like really complex like problems going on, and I'm like completely missing all of this because I'm letting my perception of just a few students
color your perception of
my perception of all of them. And it's like a very similar example to what you're talking about.
Yeah, and so like perception is everything. Like our entire lives are governed by perception. We don't get to live objective lives. We don't get to.
Yeah.
We have to live perceptually colored lives. And being aware of that makes you significantly less susceptible to your own biases than just ignoring the fact and trying to live as an objective life possible. It's not possible. It's not doable. You can't live an objective life. So what you got to do is like look at your perceptions, see what beliefs have been drawn from your experiences, and then work to recolor those beliefs into something that's more useful. Because every belief is true. You just need to find evidence for them. So.
Yeah. I think for me, like, the what I've like been thinking about a lot, and I've been like putting into place a lot, especially with these like recently fresh like losses of friendships or relationships, is, and this is a bit like counterintuitive. Maybe it's just because of like who I am as a person, but something that brings me a lot of peace is taking like total responsibility for the situation and the things that went wrong. It's not like, I know that in every conflict, like both people make mistakes. You know, both people, sometimes the other person needed to communicate more. Sometimes the other person needed to like be like a little bit more empathetic, or like not this like ready, fire, aim sort of thing. Like take a beat. You know, and I can know that I feel those feelings, and I still like validate those feelings, but I tend to focus a lot on like what role did I play in this situation going wrong, and not as like a self-blaming thing or like to get down on myself, but it gives me back the control of the situation. Because I think, and I was talking to one of my friends today, she is in this like, she's in a terrible job. She hates her job, and it's like, she sent me this text, and it's so like crushing to read, because she's this person that's just like so full of life, but she said, I feel like I've lost my like joy for life, like my spark. And I think like and we were talking about it more, and she was talking about how like one of the reasons why it's so soul crushing is because she doesn't know the timeline of when it's going to end. Like she doesn't know when she's going to be able to get a new job. Like she's applying, but you know how it is. Like, well, I guess you don't really know.
But yeah.
But like when you apply for jobs, like, you know, it could take months.
Yeah.
And I think like for me, when I really focus on where did I go wrong, that helps combat those feelings of like, this might happen to me again. Like this might be I'm doomed to this fate of just ruining all of my friendships.
Yeah.
I'm doomed to this fate of like not being able to have self-discipline.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
I'm doomed to this fate of not being able to communicate my feelings. Like this is just who I am, and I'm going to be stuck here forever. I'm going to be feeling this way forever. Sure, I'll make new friends, and then I'll lose them too. And like really focusing on where I went wrong and why that happened, and taking responsibility for that, not as things that happened to me, that things that I did, like helps me take back control so that next time it doesn't happen again. And it helps me reframe these situations as like, I would not have realized these things if this hadn't happened to me.
Sure.
Like I had to lose this friendship to understand that I suck at communicating my feelings, that setting boundaries is something I'm really weak at. And I had to lose this friendship to learn that, so that future friendships could benefit from my enhanced communication and my proactive setting of boundaries.
Matthew Hussey. Matthew Hussey. I'm sorry, Matthew. Wouldn't that be really funny if our third viewer is Matthew?
Man's got too much time.
Yeah. He says there's no such thing as like going back. Like there's a lot of instinct in us that's like, I wish I could go back and change this. And it's like, you wouldn't have wanted to go back and change this. You wouldn't even know that it was wrong unless this happened. Right? Like if this experience didn't happen, like you couldn't even conceptualize the idea that something was wrong with you in the first place. Like this happening was the greatest gift that's ever been given to you, because now you can change stuff.
Yeah.
Now you can do something about it. Like we always wish we could go back and like make a different decision, but you could have never even conceived of having made a different decision until this happened to you. And like the kind of person you are now is so much more interesting and so much better because of the experiences that you've gone through and the relationships that you've lost and the friendships that you've lost. Because like fundamentally, you are you are the result. You are the aggregate of everything that has happened to you. And that aggregate is so much more important than than living the kind of life where you don't have to experience that kind of pain in the first place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that reminds me of like that phrase, one of the most underrated phrases of all time.
Mm-hmm.
You were just doing the best that you could.
Yeah.
And it's so true. I think people say it all the time and it gets kind of thrown around and the value of that phrase is lost. But
I think it's also really important to note that it's true even if you don't think you were doing the best that you could.
Yeah.
Like,
because nobody does
anything less
than the best that they think they can.
Yeah.
Even if they think they can do, even if they know that they're capable of better, in that moment,
you made the action that you always would have made in that moment.
That is the best you could do.
Yeah.
That is the best you could do. And sometimes you have to understand, you have to go through what it feels like
you would have never made a different decision. You always would have made that decision.
Yeah, that was just that
was what happened, and now you learn.
And now you're capable of making better decisions.
You can cling on to this idea of you have made a better, different decision, and that you could be a different person, and that you wouldn't have hurt this person, or that you wouldn't have been hurt yourself. But let go or be dragged. Those are your options. It's let go or be dragged. You either have to let go of this idea that you could have been a different person, or you get dragged by your own feelings, by your own instincts, by your own emotions, because they will drag you. They will drag you down with them, because you're buying into thoughts that you shouldn't buy into.
Yeah, I think you should tell the backstory of that.
Oh yeah, so I was in Houston. I was talking to a monk, in the Vihara. And Emma will know about this because I talked to the monk that she recommended, and I was telling him about how I was having trouble with letting go, and I thought he was gonna say something very monk-like, and he kind of did, sort of monk-like, sort of not. I was expecting some sage wisdom about a samurai and which is probably racist, but regardless, we're both brown, so whatever. Instead of all of that, he just said, "Let go or be dragged." And I thought that was incredibly and he got that from somewhere else, I'm sure, but still, it was more impactful because he was wearing an orange robe and had a shaved head. So, it really mattered to me in that moment.
Yeah.
And I think that's just a really important thing to remember. I think it's really important to remember let go or be dragged, because, and as a Buddhist, I will proselytize for a moment. Most feelings that you have are the result of thoughts and your fixation on those thoughts. And a lot of the suffering that you go through is what we call the second arrow. There's pain is the first arrow. It's the one that's shot at you. The second arrow is suffering. It's the one that you shoot at yourself. And the suffering that you go through is because it is derivative of thinking, specifically thinking, not thoughts. Those are two different things. Thought is the noun, thinking is the verb. You can't avoid thoughts. You can avoid thinking. And so letting go, the concept of letting go of your thoughts.
Yeah.
Not being attached to your thoughts is the very it's the fabric of let go or be dragged. You might think that some of your thinking is really, really important, and that's ego. All of that is just ego. You have this outsized sense of importance about your own thinking, and you might think well, if I can't think, what am I? What am I really if I don't think? What if I don't analyze things? And it's very important because I think it's easy to think that I'm saying something that I'm not saying here. So we have to be really careful. I'm not saying that I'm what I am saying is that there's some things as skillful and unskillful desires, and like I said earlier, and what the difference is your intention. Right? The difference is whether you want it or not. On an inspirational level, not a desperational level. We chase some things out of desperation, and you can tell because it's very draining to chase things out of desperation. But then there are some things that we chase out of inspiration. This podcast for you was not desperation. It was inspiration. It was something that you thought was really important that you needed to share with the world. So it feels empowering when you do it. I saw like the way that you looked when we were setting up all of this equipment. Like you had a smile on your face because you're about to do something that you really enjoyed doing.
Yeah.
That's inspirational. And that is that is an example of a desire that you should chase, because those desires are desires that you've decided on.
Mm-hmm.
And when it comes to like, you'll know when let go or be dragged applies to you, because you'll start to feel panicked. And like when the emotions come up, they won't feel like they won't feel inspirational, they won't feel joyful, they won't feel peaceful. They'll feel like you're being pulled in a direction and being pulled down. And at that moment, you have to let go of two things. One, you have to let go of the emotion. And two, you simultaneously have to let go of letting go of the emotion. You have to be okay with the fact that the emotion is there.
Yeah. I know that.
You have to let go of both. Because I know, personal experience, it's really, really easy to let go of, like, it's easy to let go of the emotion. The original emotion's easy because I don't want it anyway. I can be like, oh, I don't, it's okay, it'll let go, it'll pass. But then you can start getting attached to the idea that it will pass, and then it won't pass anymore.
Yeah. Because
now you're waiting for it.
Yeah.
And that is really dangerous, because who would you be if the emotion didn't pass? Could you still be okay? If not, if you don't think you could be okay, then the emotion will stay. Because you're giving it attention. Implicitly, you're giving it attention. And it thrives off of the attention. If you're afraid of it, that's a form of attention. And that form of attention will feed it. And it will continue to feed it as long as you run away from it. Stop running in either direction. Don't run towards it and don't run away from it. Just sit.
Yeah.
And it will pass.
Yeah, that's really relevant in my life when it comes to anxiety. Because that is an emotion. I don't know if I just like didn't have a label for it when I was younger. But at least now, like, for the last like 2 or 3 years, like, it's an emotion I've become very familiar with. And the part about letting go of whatever's causing me anxiety, I've gotten a lot better at. The part that I'm working on now is holding space for my anxiety. And it's remarkable when I remember to do that, where it's like, okay, like, you know what, like, I see you, anxiety, I feel you, like, it's okay.
Yeah.
Like, you're just as much a part of my life experience as the happiness and as the joy. Like, hang out for a little bit. Yeah. I get it, you're here for a reason. That's the only time it starts to, like, dissipate. Away.
I remember I used to, in my own mind, I used to hold conferences, like boardroom meetings.
Okay.
And I invited this is just for me. I don't know if this will work for anyone else, but it worked for me. I would invite anxiety in. You'd be like, okay, so like, what do you have to say? Like I realize that, like, I actually don't give you a lot of space to talk, and so you have to, like, force yourself in and to speak your piece. That actually must be pretty frustrating. So, like, what do you have to say? Like, I'm giving you your space now. Like, what's the problem? And then usually it just tells me, like, it's like, okay, I'm actually anxious about these sort of things. Like, I worry that, like, they're not gonna like me, or I worry that you don't know what you're talking about, and you're speaking into a microphone, and that's dangerous. Like, those are all things that come up, and that's okay. It's a part of your emotions because it's useful. It helped you survive and reproduce, like, thousands of years ago, and so it still gets to be here. And frankly, it's still helpful. It didn't lose any of its utility. The problem is that we trained ourselves to believe that anxiety was the enemy, and it's not. Anxiety is a tool that sometimes gets used against us, and we get really scared when it's used against us. And I mean, rightfully so, because it's really terrifying when it gets used against us. But it's just a tool, and the tool isn't what makes it, like, evil. It's the use. The use is what's evil. And you can use anxiety to temper your more impulsive desires with, like, a healthy dose of skepticism, or you can turn it back on yourself and you can use it to terrorize yourself, or something else can use it to terrorize you.
Mm-hmm.
Both are just different implementations of anxiety. So recognizing that it is just an emotion, and you can invite it, you can like let it in, but not in, like let it stay for tea. Is I think the way Mark Manson puts it.
Yeah.
That's fine and good, and that's actually probably the way that we should be treating. And we do this intuitively with every other emotion, right? When joy comes in, we're like, hell yeah, man, come on in, like, come stay as long as you like. Sometimes we like get too far into it and we start chasing them. Like when they start leaving the house, we start like running after them. Come back.
Yeah. The butterfly net.
Yeah. Just like literally trying to catch it. But like, so joy's like maybe not the best example because we chase it. But like, for example, I'm thinking of a specific nostalgia.
Okay.
Nostalgia is a great one because like, we don't typically chase nostalgia. It just comes and we enjoy it for a moment while it's there, and then it goes away. And that was just like, that was a great experience. That was cool. I just like experienced nostalgia. That was really I like recently like discovered Dan TDM again. And like I was like, oh whoa, like I remember this, like Dr. Tresaurus and like Minecraft, and like, oh my god, well this is so cool. And then I got bored eventually because I watched a couple of his videos and I was like, okay, cool, I'm ready to move on to the next thing. And that was just a really sweet, like wonderful moment where I just got to experience it. But that can be the case with almost all of your emotions. It can be a moment where you're just like, okay, cool, like I experienced this emotion. And sometimes they're not like positive. But positive and negative are just like labels we associate things that make us comfortable and uncomfortable, because comfortable and uncomfortable they're not ethical words. They're not normative. They're not good or bad. They just are. We assign meaning to them. And those meanings don't have to exist. Like, is anger good or bad?
It just depends.
It just exists. And like, you can use a healthy dose of anger to make important change, or you can punch your wife. They're the same emotion. They really are the same emotion.
Same emotion expressed in different ways.
Yeah, in entirely different ways.
That reminds me of how like literally every single person I've texted about like my most recent friendship ending, they have all said healing and moving on from something is not a linear process. Right? Like these different emotions that come up and you feel them and then they go. And it's so unpredictable. Right? Like yesterday I was actually feeling really good. Had a great day. I had a great day with my students. I went home, had a good day, played some video games, scrolled a little bit, and then went to bed. And it was awesome. And then I woke up and it was like DEFCON 3. And I was like losing my mind, and I was texting one of the other teachers, and I was like, man, like I don't know if I'm going to be able to get through this day. And he was like, just call out, man. I was like, no, like I can't do that. I got to get through this. And then like things started to get better, and then closer to the end of the day I was alone with my thoughts again, and I went back down the rabbit hole of pain and regret and guilt and like self-flagellation. And then I started driving back to College Station.
That's such a fun word for such a terrible thing.
Self-flagellation.
Flagellation is just a great word.
Yeah, it's a good word. The drive to College Station in particular is like kind of sentimental, and just like it's just a good feeling drive. And I was playing good music, and I was feeling really great. And the last like hour in particular of the drive was just like such a high. It's so good. And I wasn't really thinking about any of the like sad things that have happened this past week. And when I did, I thought about them in a really good frame of mind. And now I'm here, like we're recording this, and we spent a little time with the family, and it's really good. And tomorrow, like, who knows? It might be good, it might be bad. Like, it's such a up and down, like roller coaster. It's like the typical roller coaster of life, but it's like been compressed. Into like a very a really short period of time.
There's two things, right? Like one, you don't go through, growth isn't growth isn't linear, right? There's a lot of periods where you're not growing at all, and then there's periods where there's a very intense amount of growth. It's usually very highly associated with an intense amount of pain, and then you just don't grow for a while, right? because you just live, and the point of life is not to grow, it's to live.
Mm-hmm.
And two, I remember you told me a quote like a few years ago that hasn't left me, that I think is very important. It was like, hey, what if that mountain that you are holding, you were only meant to climb? And I thought that was good, and I think that's also like very indicative of sometimes how we deal with our problems. It's like, this is meant to be overcome, not meant to be like the thing that crushes us and to be a crushing weight on our shoulders. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, I mean, at the end of the day, kind of just to like bring it to sort of a conclusion, like life is really hard sometimes.
Yeah.
Like, it's really tough, and the mistake that we make as people is thinking that it's not supposed to be that way sometimes.
That's true.
Like the beauty of life, what makes it so much fun and such a fascinating ride, is because there's ups and downs, and you've got to have both, right? And the more of one you have, the more of the other that you'll have. Like, they just go hand in hand. There's absolutely nothing wrong with experiencing lows in life, and you're meant to experience them, and it's okay to experience them.
I think intellectually we get that. Like, we get the idea there has to be highs and lows.
Yeah.
But when you're sitting in the mud, you're like, I didn't agree to this.
I didn't sign up for this.
consent to this.
I don't want this. Yeah.
This is the worst thing ever.
This is what life is. I don't want it.
Yeah. I mean, people absolutely feel this way. And, I feel this way, too. When it gets to this, I remember when my life was at its worst, I'm meditating every day, which is what most people think life is at their best, right?
Mm-hmm.
For me, it's when my life is at my worst. I have to meditate every day, and I'm meditating for hours at a time. This sounds like heaven for some people, I'm realizing, but for me, it was awful because I was using it to cope.
Yeah.
And there was days where I wouldn't get out of bed, and it was just it was impossible. Everything felt so bad all of the time, and I was just this can't be it. This can't be it. And I was right. It wasn't. It wasn't it.
Yeah.
There was a lot more.
Yeah.
But if I had started giving into this feeling that there would be nothing else at the end of this, if I had really capitulated to that, I would never have been able to experience the immense amount of joy that came after that. And the growth that accompanied when I actually got up and decided to do something about the way that I was feeling. That doesn't come uniformly. It doesn't come easily. It's a huge fight, but it's a fight you can't blame anyone else for. It's one that you personally just have to take up and fight on your own. You don't have to fight. You have to fight it on your own, but you don't have to face it alone.
Yeah.
And that's a very important distinction to make.
Right.
In the end, at the end, you are the one that has to get up and do the thing. No one else can do the thing for you, but you don't have to be in the thing alone. You don't have to sit in the mud alone. There are a lot of people. I can practically guarantee it. There are a lot of people who want to be there for you, and if given the opportunity, will be there for you.
Yeah.
But you can't become so reliant that you forget that this is ultimately your battle to fight, and there is pain in that, there's growth in that, but then there's also joy in that, and after that as well.
Yeah. Well said.
Thank you.
Yeah. So for any of you that are listening, going through something, just know we're humans too. We're right there with you, going through it with you.
Yeah. If you're having having a bad time.
All right. Well, for those of you that are listening, thank you so much for joining us for another episode.
This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, this was great.
Yeah.
We'll be back again.
This is the second best podcast episode I've ever been on. By the way, it's just gonna progressively get worse every single time.
just spiraling.
Yeah.
We'll see you next week.
Yep. Bye.